Final tests before breakthrough. Ancient promise revealed. When people imagine a breakthrough, they imagine noise. They imagine a moment where everything finally makes sense. A surge of clarity. A sudden reversal. A visible reward for everything they endured. But that's not how it actually happens. For most people, the breakthrough doesn't arrive with answers. It arrives with a test, a final one. And this test is more dangerous than all the previous ones combined, because it appears after you've already stayed. You survived the silence. You endured the delay. You didn't walk away when it would have been reasonable to do so. And just when you think the hardest part must be over, this moment appears. Nothing collapses. Nothing explodes. Nothing clearly goes wrong. Instead, life asks something quieter and far more precise. It asks whether you will remain the person you became, when there is no longer pressure forcing you to be careful. This is where many believers fall, not because they lacked faith, but because they misunderstood what success was about to require. They thought staying was the finish line. It wasn't. Staying was preparation. Because there is a moment, rare, subtle, and often unrecognized, where the struggle loosens its grip, but the reward has not yet revealed itself. And in that space, the final test begins. This test does not challenge your endurance. It challenges your alignment. It asks whether you will rush to claim relief before your foundation is ready to hold what's coming, whether you will trade depth for speed, whether you will abandon the discipline that shaped you, the moment the pressure eases. This is why so many people get close, closer than they've ever been, and then quietly undo everything. Not with failure, with impatience. They change tone. They relax standards. They move too quickly. They stop listening. And the thing they waited so long for passes through their hands without staying. This is the final test before breakthrough. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel dramatic. And it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels reasonable. And that's exactly why it works. Because only those who understand this moment will recognize that the breakthrough does not arrive to rescue you from who you were. It arrives to confirm who you have become. And from here forward, everything depends on whether you can carry that truth without rushing past it. So stay with this, because what comes next is not about believing harder. It's about remaining steady when the finish line is close enough to tempt you into forgetting what made you ready to reach it. At this stage, the test stops being abstract. It becomes personal. Because now the question isn't what happens to people. It's what happens to you when the pressure lifts. When you're no longer fighting just to survive, but deciding how to live with what you've survived. This is where patterns reemerge. Old habits you thought were gone start knocking quietly. Old shortcuts feel tempting again, not because you're desperate, but because you're tired of being careful. You tell yourself you're wiser now, that you can handle things differently this time, that you won't lose your center again. And that confidence is not wrong, but it is incomplete. Because wisdom without vigilance slowly turns into assumption. You assume you'll notice when things shift, You assume you'll feel it if you're drifting. You assume growth is permanent once it's earned. But growth isn't permanent. It's maintained. Earlier, the struggle maintained it for you. Now, nothing does. That's the danger. This is why the final test is not dramatic. It doesn't show up as temptation screaming for your attention. It shows up as permission, quiet, reasonable permission, to loosen what once kept you grounded. You stop asking hard questions of yourself. You stop listening as deeply. You move faster than your foundation can support. And nothing immediately breaks. That's what makes it so convincing. You still look fine. You still function. You still progress on the surface. But depth doesn't grow at the speed of momentum. And when momentum outruns depth, collapse doesn't happen loudly. It happens later. This is why so many people say, I don't know when things started going wrong. They didn't go wrong. They went unwatched. The breakthrough didn't disappear. It was simply postponed by misalignment. And misalignment at this stage is subtle. It's not abandoning everything you learn. It's neglecting it. It's forgetting that what shaped you was never meant to be temporary discipline. It was meant to become identity. Because the breakthrough ahead doesn't need you to be stronger than before. It needs you to be consistent. Consistent in attention. Consistent in restraint. Consistent in honoring the process, even when it no longer demands effort. This is the final test before breakthrough. Not whether you can endure hardship, but whether you can steward ease without losing the depth that hardship gave you. And that question, uncomfortable, quiet, and persistent, will stay with you until it's answered. Not in intention, but in how you live when no one is watching. And this is where the weight of the moment finally becomes clear. Because ease is not neutral. Ease reveals. It reveals what you were doing out of pressure and what you've actually integrated into who you are. When life demanded everything from you, you rose to the demand. You were careful because you had to be. You were focused because there was no room to drift. Now the demand is gone. And without demand, the real question surfaces. Who are you when nothing forces you to be intentional? This is why the final test feels unfair to some people. They feel like they've already proven themselves. They feel like they've earned the right to relax. And in a way, they have. But relaxation is not the same as release. You can rest without letting go of alignment by the key. You can breathe without loosening your grip on what matters. The danger comes when rest turns into disengagement, when attention slips, when standards soften, when you stop checking in with yourself because things are finally going okay. That's when the slow drift begins. Not away from belief, but away from awareness. You don't stop caring. You just stop noticing. And what you don't notice, you can't correct. This is why the ancient path always warned about comfort more than suffering. Suffering sharpens you. Comfort dulls you, unless you remain awake within it. Awake doesn't mean anxious. It means present. It means you still ask yourself the hard questions, even when nothing around you demands them. It means you remember that what formed you was not meant to be left behind like a season. It was meant to be carried forward as posture. Because what's coming next, the thing you've been waiting for, will not arrive to test your faith. It will arrive to use it. And use requires readiness. Not emotional readiness, not excitement. Structural readiness. Can your inner framework support what's about to be placed on it? Many people receive opportunities they prayed for and lose themselves inside them. Not because the opportunity was wrong, but because they loosened the very disciplines. That made them capable of carrying it. So the final test before breakthrough is not about proving devotion. It's about maintaining depth. When surface-level success begins to appear, it's about staying grounded. When momentum returns, and this is the moment where staying becomes quieter than ever. No applause, no urgency, no visible pressure. Just a daily choice to remain aligned when nothing screams for your attention. This is the test almost no one talks about, and it's the one that decides whether the breakthrough ahead becomes a foundation or just another chapter you'll later wonder why you couldn't hold. This is why the final test is so often misunderstood. People expect a challenge that looks like opposition, resistance, delay, something they can point to and say, this is what I'm up against. But the last test doesn't look like resistance. It looks like permission. Permission to move faster. Permission to take shortcuts that seem harmless. Permission to stop tending what once demanded daily care. Nothing warns you that the ground is changing beneath your feet. Nothing signals that the stakes are higher now than they were before. Because the danger isn't loss anymore. The danger is misuse. When you were struggling, you handled everything carefully. You weighed your choices. You listened deeply. You didn't assume you knew better. Now confidence has returned. And confidence, if left unattended, can quietly replace humility. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just enough to change how you carry yourself. You begin to trust momentum more than discernment. You start measuring progress by visibility instead of integrity. You value speed because it feels like proof that things are finally working. And none of that feels wrong. That's what makes it powerful. This is the stage where many people don't fail. They outgrow their own foundations. They build higher than what can support them, because they stopped reinforcing the base. They don't abandon what shaped them. They simply stop returning to it. And over time, that distance matters. Because the breakthrough ahead is not light. It carries weight, new responsibility, new influence, new consequences. And weight doesn't care about intentions. It only responds to structure. This is why the final test isn't about belief at all. It's about capacity. Can your inner life carry what your outer life is about to receive? Can your awareness match your opportunity? Can your restraint keep pace with your reach? Earlier, hardship kept you contained. Now, nothing does. So containment has to come from within. This is where the work shifts from endurance to stewardship, from surviving to sustaining, from asking, can I make it through this? To asking, can I remain whole once I do? That question is uncomfortable because it doesn't flatter you. It doesn't celebrate how far you've come. It quietly asks whether you are willing to keep living by what formed you when there is no immediate reason to do so. This is the final test before breakthrough. Not a test of how much you believe, but of how faithfully you will carry what belief has prepared you to hold. And the answer to that test is never spoken aloud. It's revealed slowly in what you choose to preserve when no one is watching and nothing is demanding that you do. There is a moment, often unnoticed, when the world begins to respond to you differently. Doors open more easily. People listen more closely. Opportunities arrive with less resistance. And if you're not careful, you assume this response is the breakthrough itself. It isn't. It's the signal that one is approaching. This is where many people misstep. Not because they're careless, but because they're relieved that the struggle loosened, relieved that things no longer feel heavy, relieved that they can finally move without friction. Relief lowers guard, and a lowered guard is exactly what this moment tests. Because now, the work is no longer about proving anything. It's about preserving what was proven in private when no one affirmed it. You no longer need to fight for attention. You no longer need to explain yourself. You no longer need to justify your pace, which means the only thing left guiding you is your inner posture. This is where integrity becomes expensive. Not morally, structurally. Integrity means you continue choosing depth even when speed is rewarded. It means you slow yourself down when momentum invites you to rush. It means you don't outsource discernment to applause or external validation. And that choice costs something. It costs comfort. It costs ease. It costs the right to drift with the current. But what it buys is alignment. Alignment between who you are becoming and what you are about to carry. Because the breakthrough ahead is not fragile, but you are responsible for how you receive it. Many people pray for increase, but few prepare for the weight of increase. They assume growth will automatically mature them. It doesn't. Growth amplifies whatever structure already exists. If awareness is shallow, success exposes it. If discipline is loose, opportunity exploits it. If attention is scattered, influence fragments you. This is why the final test doesn't remove obstacles. It removes excuses. You can no longer say, I would be better if things were easier. Things are easier now. So the question sharpens. Will you become better or merely busier? Will you deepen or just expand? Because expansion without depth feels like breakthrough at first and collapse later. This is a space you're standing in now. Not the end of the journey, not the reward, but the narrow place where the future is decided quietly by what you choose to protect, when nothing forces you to protect it. And that choice, repeated without drama, without recognition, without urgency, is what determines whether the breakthrough you're nearing becomes a foundation you stand on, or a moment you pass through, and never fully understand why it didn't stay. And here's the part almost no one prepares for. When the breakthrough finally comes, it does not slow down for you. It doesn't wait for you to adjust. It doesn't pause so you can get comfortable. It moves with its own momentum. And whatever structure you have built inside yourself is what will determine whether that momentum lifts you or pulls you apart. This is why the final test is not about receiving the breakthrough. It's about holding it. Holding attention without losing humility. Holding responsibility without losing tenderness. Holding influence without losing restraint. Many people think the danger is failing before the breakthrough, but far more people fail after it because they were never taught how to carry what they asked for. They confuse arrival with completion. They confuse opportunity with mastery. They assume that because the door opened, everything inside them is ready. But doors don't measure readiness. They reveal it. This is why the quiet disciplines matter most here. The unseen habits, the private check-ins, the deliberate pauses before decisions. These are not remnants of a hard season. They are safeguards for a larger one. You don't abandon them because things are working. You lean into them because things are working. This is the wisdom most people learn too late. They loosen what kept them aligned. Right when alignment becomes most valuable, they stop listening. Right when clarity requires more attention, not less. And when things eventually begin to strain, they don't understand why. They say, well, I prayed for this. They say, I worked for this. They say, I thought this was the breakthrough. And it was. But it was never meant to replace your inner structure. It was meant to test it. The final test before breakthrough is not dramatic resistance. It is sustained responsibility. And sustained responsibility demands something deeper than belief. It demands continuity. Can you remain the same person? When circumstances finally change, can you carry forward the awareness, restraint, and depth that were forged in silence into a season where noise returns? Because the real reward is not what changes around you. It's what doesn't change within you. That steadiness, that quiet, disciplined presence is what allows the breakthrough to settle instead of pass through. And this is the moment where the path narrows one last time, not to block you, not to test your endurance again, but to ensure that when the ground widens ahead, you will not lose your footing. Stay here, not out of fear, not out of hesitation, but out of understanding. Because the breakthrough you are approaching is not asking whether you are worthy of it. It is asking whether you are ready to remain whole inside it. And this is where everything becomes very quiet again. Not the heavy silence you knew before, not the absence that made you question yourself. A different kind. The silence of responsibility. The kind that doesn't press on you from the outside, but waits for you to move first. At this stage, no one is forcing your choices. No crisis is demanding your attention. No pressure is shaping your behavior for you. You are free, and freedom is the final test. Because freedom reveals whether discipline was something you endured or something you became. Earlier, restraint kept you safe. Now, restraint keeps you true. Earlier, awareness helped you survive. Now, awareness determines how much you can carry without distortion. This is why the most dangerous thought at this stage is, I deserve this. Not because it's untrue, but because it subtly shifts your posture from stewardship to entitlement. Entitlement loosens care. Stewardship sharpens it. And the breakthrough ahead requires stewardship. It requires someone who will handle growth without exploiting it. who will carry influence without feeding on it, who will move forward without leaving their inner life behind. This is why some people reach moments they prayed for and still feel strangely hollow inside them. They received the outcome, but abandoned the posture that gave it meaning. They moved on too quickly from what formed them. You are not being asked to stay in hardship. You are being asked to stay in alignment. To keep choosing depth when ease invites you to skim. To keep listening when noise returns. To keep pausing when momentum encourages speed. This is where faith stops being something you lean on and becomes something you live from. Not visibly, not loudly, but consistently. And consistency at this level is powerful. It doesn't impress crowds. It doesn't demand attention. But it creates something most people never experience. A life where growth does not fracture you, where increase does not confuse you, where change does not erode your center. This is the final test before breakthrough. Not a test you pass once, a test you live through daily, by how carefully you treat what you've been given, when no one is telling you what to do. And if you can remain here, awake, grounded, and deliberate, then when the breakthrough fully arrives, it will not overwhelm you. It will rest on you. And that is the difference between something that visits your life and something that becomes part of it. Stay with this understanding, because what comes next is not another challenge to overcome. It is a reality to inhabit, and inhabiting it well depends entirely on whether you carried forward the depth that was formed before the world ever noticed you. There will come a day when you look back and realize nothing dramatic marked the moment things truly changed. No announcement, no visible turning point, no single event you could point to and say, that was it. What changed was you, quietly. You learned how to move without rushing, how to choose without reacting, how to hold space for growth without trying to control it. And because of that, life began to trust you with more. Not all at once, not recklessly, but steadily. This is what most people never understand about breakthrough. It unfolds at the speed of your inner stability. If you are scattered, it hesitates. If you are shallow, it overwhelms. If you are misaligned, it exposes. But if you are grounded, if you have learned to remain attentive when things go well, it settles. You stop chasing outcomes and start shaping environments. You stop asking, what's next? And start asking, what's required now? That question changes everything, because what's required now is rarely dramatic. It's usually simple, ordinary, unseen. Show up with integrity. Protect your attention. Honor the process that formed you. Move deliberately when momentum invites speed. These choices don't feel heroic. They feel almost invisible. But invisibility at this stage is strength. It means you're no longer driven by the need to prove anything. You're anchored by the understanding that depth outlasts display. This is why those who truly rise rarely look rushed. They don't hurry toward significance. They don't scramble to be noticed. They know the cost of moving before structure is ready. And they remember something that most people forget. The final test before breakthrough is not whether you can endure difficulty. It's whether you can remain intentional when difficulty is gone. Can you treat ease with the same care you treated hardship? Can you maintain awareness when vigilance no longer feels necessary? Can you stay rooted when nothing is pulling at you? If you can, then what you're stepping into will not distort you. It will expand you. And expansion, when it rests on alignment, does not break the person carrying it. It deepens them. So don't rush this moment. Don't try to label it. Don't demand visible confirmation. Stay attentive. Stay deliberate. Stay whole. Because the breakthrough you're nearing is not waiting for effort. It's waiting for consistency. And consistency, quiet, grounded, uncelebrated, is the last threshold you cross. Before everything you've been preparing for finally has somewhere safe to land. And once that consistency settles into you, something unexpected happens. You stop wondering when the breakthrough will arrive, not because you've given up on it, but because your life no longer feels like it's on hold. You are no longer postponing your integrity for a future moment. You are no longer suspending your values until circumstances improve. You are living from the center that was formed long before anything changed. This is the quiet maturity that few people ever reach. Most people live as if life hasn't started yet, as if meaning begins after success, after clarity, after arrival. But those who pass the final test understand something different. Life doesn't begin after the breakthrough. The breakthrough arrives when life is already being lived well. This is why the waiting no longer feels like waiting. It feels like inhabiting. You inhabit your days with attention. You inhabit your choices with care. You inhabit your progress without urgency. And in doing so, you become someone the future can trust. Because the future is not impressed by intensity. It responds to stability. It leans toward those who will not be undone by what they receive. This is why the final test is never announced. If it were, people would perform their way through it. They would endure it temporarily and then revert. Instead, it reveals itself slowly. In how you behave when no one is watching, and how you choose when there is no pressure, and how you treat what is small while waiting for what is large. And those choices accumulate, not as drama, not as momentum, but as readiness. So when the breakthrough finally settles, and it won't feel like a sudden miracle. It will feel like something that fits, like a weight you were shaped to carry, like a responsibility that doesn't fracture you, like a season that doesn't demand you become someone else to survive it. That is the real promise hidden inside the final test. Not that life will become easy, but that it will become coherent. And coherence between who you are, what you do, and what you carry is what allows increase to remain a gift instead of becoming a burden. So if you are still here, still listening, still present, still resisting the urge to rush, take that as confirmation. You are not late. You are not stuck. You are not waiting for permission. You are being trusted. Trusted with a season that does not force you to prove anything, but quietly asks whether you will continue to live by what shaped you when nothing requires it. That is the final test before breakthrough. And passing it does not feel like victory. It feels like peace with responsibility. The kind of peace that allows what comes next to stay. And when peace with responsibility becomes your baseline, you begin to understand why this test had to be last. Because once you reach this place, you cannot be shaped the same way again. Earlier seasons pressed on you from the outside. They constrained you. They cornered you. They forced growth through pressure. This season does the opposite. It opens space. And space reveals whether your inner structure is strong enough to stand without walls. When there is no immediate threat, no urgency, no visible deadline, you discover what actually governs your choices, not your intentions, not your beliefs, your patterns. Patterns decide what you preserve. Patterns decide what you neglect. Patterns decide whether alignment remains or quietly erodes. That is why this final test stretches over time. Not days, not weeks, but ordinary moments strung together. Moments where nothing is at stake, until you realize everything is. You wake up and choose how attentively you live. You decide what you allow your mind to dwell on. You choose whether to remain deliberate or drift. No one corrects you here. No one warns you. No one intervenes. This is trust in its purest form, and trust always comes with risk. The risk that you will treat freedom casually. The risk that you will mistake calm for completion. The risk that you will let what formed you become optional. This is why so many people look back on their lives and say, I don't know when I lost my way. They didn't lose it in crisis. They lost it in comfort. Comfort didn't destroy them. It distracted them. But if you remain aware, if you continue choosing depth without being forced, something different happens. Comfort becomes a place of refinement instead of erosion. You begin to practice presence without pressure. You cultivate restraint without fear. You maintain discipline without desperation. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your capacity expands. Not because you pushed for it, but because you proved you could hold space without filling it with noise. This is when the breakthrough finally settles fully, not as an event, but as a state where your outer life can grow without outgrowing your inner life, where opportunity does not distort you, where increase does not demand you shrink parts of yourself to survive it. This is the ancient promise hidden beneath the final test. Not that you will be spared responsibility, but that responsibility will not undo you. Because you learned how to remain whole when no one was watching, when nothing was collapsing, and when the only thing shaping you was the choice to stay aligned. That is why this test came last. Because once you pass it, you don't return to earlier versions of yourself. You move forward differently, quietly, steadily, with depth that does not depend on pressure. And from here, what unfolds will not need to rush you. It will meet you at the pace you are now capable of sustaining. Stay here, not because you are afraid of what comes next, but because you understand that what comes next will last only if you carry it with the same care that shaped you before it ever arrived. And this is where the story reaches its quiet center. Not an ending, a settling, because by now you can feel it. The urgency has fully fallen away, not because nothing matters, but because everything is finally in its proper place. You are no longer bracing for impact. You are no longer scanning for danger. You are no longer measuring every day against the future you're afraid to miss. You are present. And presence at this level is not passive. It is alert without anxiety, engaged without force, open without surrendering your center. This is what the final test was always preparing you for. Not the breakthrough itself, but the life after it. A life where you must choose attention without crisis, depth without desperation, integrity without applause. And that is harder than it sounds. Because now, the only thing keeping you aligned is your relationship with yourself. You no longer need pressure to behave wisely. You no longer need fear to remain careful. You no longer need suffering to stay awake. You have learned how to hold yourself. And once you learn that, something irreversible happens. You stop asking life to prove itself to you. You stop demanding signs. You stop negotiating your values with circumstances. You trust what has been formed. That trust doesn't make you rigid. It makes you grounded. You can adapt without losing yourself. You can grow without abandoning your roots. You can receive more without becoming less. This is why the final test is invisible to most people. It doesn't feel like a trial. It feels like normal life returning. And only those who understand that normal is where alignment is either preserved or lost will remain awake here. So if you're still listening, still steady, still unmoved by urgency, that tells you something important. You didn't just endure the hard season. You integrated it. And integration is the real breakthrough. Because integrated people don't fracture under change. They don't become unrecognizable when things improve. They don't drift when attention shifts elsewhere. They carry themselves forward intact. This is the ancient promise revealed at the end of the path, that the person who learns to remain aligned in ease will never again be undone by hardship, not because hardship disappears, but because it no longer has the power to disorganize you. So let this chapter settle where it belongs. Not as something to remember line by line, but as something that quietly informs how you move tomorrow. There is nothing left to prove here, nothing left to chase, only something to live. And if you can live from this place, awake, deliberate, and whole, then whatever unfolds next will not take you by surprise. It will meet you, exactly as you are now, ready to carry it. And now, the last thing this chapter asks of you is simple. Do not rush past this moment, because what you are feeling right now is not emptiness. It is completion. The striving that once lived underneath your days has loosened. The need to constantly interpret every delay has quieted. The fear that improvement would cost you yourself has lost its grip. That doesn't mean life will stop testing you. It means the tests will no longer define you. From here on, challenges will arrive differently. They won't ask whether you can survive. They will ask whether you can remain coherent, whether you can keep your inner life intact, while your outer life grows, whether you can hold responsibility without becoming rigid, whether you can receive recognition without losing humility, whether you can move forward without abandoning the disciplines that once protected you. This is the kind of maturity that doesn't announce itself. It shows up in restraint, in timing, in the ability to pause even when momentum is available. And that ability, quiet, uncelebrated, deeply grounded, is what allows a breakthrough to become a home, instead of a moment you pass through and outgrow. So if you've stayed with this chapter all the way to the end, understand what that says about you. You're not chasing something anymore. You're preparing to carry something. And carrying requires more than belief. It requires presence, consistency, care, not once, but daily. This is the final test before breakthrough, not because it blocks the way forward, but because it ensures that when the way opens, you will not lose yourself inside it. So take this with you, not as pressure, not as instruction, as orientation. If this chapter helped you see your season differently, take a moment to support the journey, like the video. Share it with someone who is close to change but doesn't know it yet. And subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Because what comes next is not about preparation. It is about revelation. And it begins right where you are now. And this is where we let it end. Not because there is nothing more to say, but because saying more would take away from what has already landed. This chapter was never meant to leave you energized. It was meant to leave you steady. If you feel calmer than expected, if you feel less urgent, less restless, less pulled, that is not loss of momentum. That is readiness. Readiness doesn't rush. Readiness doesn't demand proof. Readiness knows when to stop speaking and start living. So we don't add another lesson. We don't push another idea. We don't circle the same truth again. We trust the silence. Because the silence now is no longer empty. It's full of alignment. And alignment doesn't need emphasis. It holds on its own. This chapter ends here, not abruptly, not dramatically, but cleanly. What comes next will not ask you to prepare more. It will reveal what preparation was for. Until then, remain as you are now, present, grounded,